Chair recognizes itself for questions. How come we are exporting less rice to Cuba than we were in 2009? What's the reason?
I think it's hard for us to get inside the mind of Alamport to find out what rice.
Concern is the exporting of rice. What's good for the United States? What's good for American businesses with this question? As I mentioned in my opening statement.
I mean, I can start and
Sure,
just say
Mr. Smith.
to the extent that we hear from exporters, and I'm sure you all hear from exporters as well, we can speculate on why trade may have gone up or down, but probably the primary thing that we hear from exporters, at least on the Treasury side, is the lack of availability of financing or credit that they can get. They tell us that their competitors in other countries can get, whether it's private financing or government financing, and we're restricted by statute from allowing that.
So if we change the statute, we'd have to change the statute to allow the exporter to assume the risk of whether Cuba pays or not. We've already heard that they don't pay their bills, but why not let the exporter assume that risk?
I think that's a decision for Congress to make. It's in the statute.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Y'all are awful
In
quiet.
the statute, yes.
How does the state-run government company put U.S. exporters at a disadvantage? Alamport. How does that put us at a disadvantage?
Clearly, they've been making purchasing decisions since 2009, where both the variety of the exports that we've sent over there, as well as the dollar value, have gone down. So they're making purchase decisions going with other suppliers. A lot of the other suppliers have been in country for some time, developing relationships, helping to create demand, presumably, and that's what I think a lot of our stakeholders in the agriculture community are looking for as we look to this new relationship, that same sort of advantage.
Mr. Borman, any comment?
I don't really have anything to add to that.
I have a constituent, Ms. Rogers, who claims that she's owed more than $40 million from the Cuban government. Grandfather brought John Deere and Caterpillar to Cuba. She's one of many 6,000 claimants against the Cuban government for their actions 50 years ago. What is the status of those claims as a whole? The claims against the Cuban government for confiscation of property and assets belonging to others. Mr. Keating, Mr. Smith?
I was just going to say, I think that that's the State Department has the primary jurisdiction. I think they have ongoing discussions or planned discussions. That's outside of the Treasury Department expertise.
Do either Mr. Carsten or Borman know any status of either one of those or any of those claims?
No.
As a political issue, it has become a political issue, is it not, in the overall discussion of whether or not we should open up to Cuba or Cuba open up to the United States? Is that a fair statement, Mr. Smith?
I mean, it's certainly an issue for the administration and for Congress to weigh. We still have in our Treasury regulations the provisions from the statute that do not allow any financing or other credit to be provided involving transactions for confiscated property. So we still have that restriction in our regulations that's in the statute. I think when you're talking about any further discussions involving those claims, I think that is very much of a matter for the diplomatic side of our government along with Congress to consider.
I will yield to the ranking member, Mr. Keating.